What is up, everybody? Welcome to a very early edition of Crunch Time here on RotoGrinders. The MLB schedule for this Saturday all over the place because of two rainout games yesterday. And so we've got a 12:10 Eastern time lock. That's a 9 a.m. Pacific time lock for this Saturday. So grab your coffee wherever you are. It's early, but we've got baseball talk for you. Pretty good slates here this afternoon to talk about. Three of us here to go over that with you. I am Justin Van Zuden, STL Cardinals 84. We'll be hosting the show for you this afternoon or this morning. I guess it's still AM everywhere. I'm just not used to that. I got Tim Buell alongside. Tim, what's going on today?
Yeah, not much, Justin. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting slate with a lot of, pretty bad pitching options and a lot of different ways that we can, play our bat. So I think this is a really great tournament slate, and we got some weather to add a little wrinkle into.
Yeah, for sure. That was weather was a big issue last night. I'll pull that up in just a second, and we'll go through that. We've got John Breslin, aka Squirrel Patrol, alongside as well. John, what's going on this morning?
Not much. It's my first baseball show of the season. Been taking a little bit of a hibernation after the basketball regular season. But yeah, calling me out of the bullpen for the early morning show this morning.
Well, thanks for hopping on. Always fun when we've got three of us here. And it's the NBA playoffs going in full force. Sacramento forced to Game 7 in that series. So Sacramento and Golden State will be going to Game 7 tomorrow, I believe. And we've got a couple NHL Game 7s on the docket. So it's playoff time in those sports. They'll be done fairly soon. And then all eyes we'll turn to baseball. But as for the slate on this Saturday, so it's a little bit wonky to break it down because, as I mentioned, there's games starting all over the place today. So we've got a 12:10 game, we've got a 105 game, we've got a 2:10 game, we've got a 3:07 game. So 4 games that start at individual time slots. And then there's also 4 games that start at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So DraftKings has combined this into one 8-game slate, which makes it a little bit easier to break down. Of course, our show is sponsored by Fanduel, so I always want to show them some love. So what Fanduel has done is they've broken it out. Those first 4 games are a very early slate, which is already pretty much sold out. And then the next 4 games are on the second early slate. And then they've added a couple more of the later afternoon starts to that, including the San Francisco-San Diego game in Mexico City, which has a 15 or 15 and a half, depending on where you look, run total. So that stadium sits at about 2,000 feet higher than Coors Field does. So expecting a lot of runs. I think Derek Carty said yesterday that the bat has that projected for about 17 runs. So if you're playing the second early slate on FanDuel, just make sure you're loading up on some bats in that game with the massive total. So we're going to focus kind of the analysis here on this full 8-game slate. So that way, if you're playing the 2 different slates on FanDuel, you can kind of mix and match it based on what slate you're playing. A little bit easier to break it down that way as opposed to trying to do 3 different breakdowns in 35 minutes or something like that. So I've got DraftKings up on the screen share for now. And then we'll kind of, we can add in some thoughts on how to split out the FanDuel slate as needed. But before we get into the breakdown, Tim mentioned the weather, so I want to pull that up. So this is Kevin Roth's weather forecast as of right now. The ones to be concerned about in Minnesota, he's got that as yellow for passing showers / downpours, but nothing that's going to be a complete washout. He's got New York against Atlanta as orange yellow. That game, of course, got rained out last night after 5 innings, so it was an official game, but they were not able to completely finish. And he's got Cleveland and Boston as yellow-orange. Those are the early games. So it appears that New York is the biggest spot for concern, and I believe that is a 4 p.m. start, but I'll go back to the schedule here and double-check that. And it's going to default to the late slate, so we'll go back to early. So we'll have to keep an eye on that weather, but these are not the games that start at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. So you can see New York is 4:05, Boston is 4:10. So There are other games, obviously, that start around that same time frame that you can pivot to if you need to. But as we kind of head into pitching here, I got to re-add everybody to my player pool. All right. So as we move back into pitching, we can see that Spencer Strider is the most expensive and likely the most popular pitcher on the board. And has a 7.5 strikeout prop today. So, Tim, what are you doing as kind of an initial thought on pitching and how to handle maybe Strider with the weather this afternoon?
Yeah, so as of right now, I am going to be pitching Spencer Strider because I really like what Kevin says, that playing uninterrupted after the late start would be the likely outcome. So, like, given their, willingness to play yesterday in the same similar conditions, I feel like they're going to play today. And I really like, you don't want to have the scenario where they had with Max Fried yesterday, where he got like the 6-inning complete game, because Strider's 11-9, right? So like you need Strider to play his usual amount of innings uninterrupted, and I think that's what we're going to see today. So right now, I'm going to be playing Spencer Strider, but obviously, if that's not the safest route to go, the safest route to go would probably be to go Hunter Green against Oakland. He's 9,000, which is a pretty significant savings over Spencer Strider. But personally, I think I really, if you don't want to play both of them, like if you want to punt SP2 with like Erod or Dean Kramer or Patrick Corbin, I guess I don't really want to do that, but I think Hunter Green and Erod is going to be a pretty popular combination. And I think you could play Hunter Green and Erod if you're playing cash games, but I'm sticking with Strider for cash games and single entry today.
Yeah, I think those are going to be the most popular options. Throw Gausman in there as well. And those are pretty much the four guys that I think most people are going to be on today. Strider, pending the weather, Gausman, Green, and Eduardo Rodriguez, given the fact that he's been pitching well, and 6,600 on DraftKings is a pretty fair price tag for Erod with the numbers he's been putting up. In fact, if I sort by point per dollar projections, yeah, he's the number one guy. So not that means everything in baseball by any means, but just to show that he does grade out well at that salary. All right, John, what are you doing at pitcher this afternoon?
Yeah, actually, I think Tim covered it pretty well. I think you can go with Spencer Strider. I think there's even some leeway there because I think the other option, Hunter Green and Kevin Gausman. Green's starting at 4:07, so that's a couple of minutes after the Atlanta game goes to start. Gausman is starting at 3:07, so that's an hour earlier. But you could potentially pivot down if we do get news about the Atlanta Mets game with the weather there. You can potentially make a pivot to a pitcher that is playing, but I think Kevin Roth expects the game to play, and that really affected the ownership on the pitchers last night. Like both Peterson and Fried came in like way lower owned than they would have been without the weather. And Roth called the game perfectly. He said, they're going to keep playing until they can't play. Once they start the game, they're not going to stop until they probably have to stop permanently. And this game, I think if they wait, he's saying they can play it uninterrupted, and they really seem motivated to get this game in. So yeah, I'm going with Spencer Strider as my SP1. I probably like Hunter Green as the SP2, especially in tournaments. He's not the safest guy, so maybe cash games you want to go with Gausman. But yeah, I think it's those three predominantly for me today.
Anybody's safe against Oakland. You can throw a ragtag arm out there. The A's can't hit. But in all seriousness, Green sometimes tends to implode. Just a little less likely probably today, given the opponent. But before we pivot over to bats, I just want to let everybody know you can sign up for the Fanduel Sportsbook if you're in a legal sports betting state. Take advantage of their awesome new bonus offer. New customers bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions apply on that. You can check it out at the Fanduel Sportsbook. And I've got a pop quiz for you guys this morning, so I'm glad I got two co-hosts. We can get two thoughts on this. So obviously, given my username STL Cardinals 84, I'm a big Cardinals fan. The Cardinals are not good right now. They are 10-17. They are in the cellar. They're behind the Reds, and they are 8.5 games behind the first place Pittsburgh Pirates on April 29th. And the Cardinals are facing Clayton Kershaw tonight, and the Pirates have a doubleheader against the Nationals and Patrick Corbin. So it is conceivable that before the day is done, the Cardinals could be 10 games behind the Pirates in April, which obviously it's April and baseball is a long season, but they're 10-17. The Cardinals have lost every single series opener all year, and they've lost 9 straight night games. So I was doing some digging. I can't find this on FanDuel Sportsbook. So FanDuel only offers odds to win the division. They don't offer odds to make or miss the playoffs. But I'm curious as to what a non-biased fan thinks. For the 10-17 Cardinals, already 8.5 games out of first. John, I'll give you first crack. What are the current Cardinals odds to make the playoffs? And I found this on DraftKings. So current odds to make the playoffs at 10-17.
Say like plus 200, like 2-1.
Okay. Tim, what do you think?
Go ahead, John.
I'll just add, just to make you feel better. Last time my Nationals won the World Series, I think they were under 500 at the All-Star break. This is 2019.
Yeah, it's a long season. But 10-17, they've been awful.
Yeah. My first instinct says like plus 350, but I don't know.
Okay. So I'm a person who likes to emotional hedge. So if I have a good day sports betting, I've been dumping some money on the Cardinals to miss the playoffs. That way, if they do miss the playoffs, I'm going to have like a flood of cash coming in when the season ends to make me feel a little better. But the Cardinals are plus 110 to make the playoffs right now, which makes absolutely no sense to me. Like, I get that they were supposed to be pretty good, but the pitching is horrible. The offense hasn't looked right. Like Arenado looks lost. It's clear that, I mean, obviously you see where they're missing Yadier Molina because Contreras clearly not good at calling pitches compared to what Yadi was for, 15 years. But anyway, John said plus 200, Tim said 300, whatever. That's kind of the range I would expect. I didn't know if it was just me being a little biased, but anyway, minus 135, minus 140 on no, like that's been every night they lose. I just dump a little bit on them to miss the playoffs. And until, I mean, obviously if it gets to minus 300 or something, I'm not going to be doing that, but plus 110 to still make the playoffs, I thought was a little bit surprising given the start. For what it's worth,
Chris Flexen was just scratched, just so everyone knows.
Oh, that's a downgrade for the Toronto offense. No matter who.
Easton McGee. I think that's a real person, and he is now the starter for Seattle. Easton McGee. I don't know who that is, but that's the new starter.
I don't either. At some point, I can try to bring up some minor league stats here. While I had those odds up, if you want to be a believer, the Pirates are plus 370 to make the playoffs. So if you're a believer in the Pirates' 18-8 start, potentially 19-8 with Patrick Corbin pitching against them this afternoon, you can get the Pirates at plus 370 to win or to make the playoffs, and about plus 600 to win the NL Central. So in any case, that's my Cardinals rant for this morning. If you agree with me that the odds seem a little bit weird, you can bet on them to miss the playoffs at like minus 145 still. In any case, we can move along to the bats now. I'll try to find some info on this Seattle pitcher as you guys chat, but let's just talk offense in general. If I sort by projected ownership, you can kind of see that it's all over the place. Like right now we've got Toronto. If you just look at like the top 10 ownership hitters, Toronto, Miami, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Toronto. So not a clear chalk offense today. John, I'll throw this to you first as far as overall teams to target, offenses to target, and then we'll get into the positions. What are you looking at this afternoon?
So actually like Toronto as my top stack. I mean, I've got them rated as the top offense today. That was, when Chris Flexen was still pitching, but it probably isn't really a downgrade. And I don't have them as the highest owned stack by any means on the 8-game slate. that looks like it's going to be like the Pirates, maybe even like Cleveland. So I do what you can to get Toronto in there. I think you can get 5 Toronto bats in there, and you mix them with a cheaper stack, whether it's Pittsburgh or Miami, maybe even Washington. And yeah, then so you're getting the top offense on the day at fairly low ownership, relative to most days for the top stack.
All right, Easton McGee was a Tampa prospect. 27 games, 22 starts, 107 innings last year at AAA. Had a 5.43 ERA, 5.02 xFIP, and a 17% strikeout rate. A little bit better in terms of his numbers so far this year for Seattle at AAA. Nothing outstanding, but he definitely doesn't strike a lot of guys out. Doesn't walk a ton of guys, has decent command. But obviously it's a step up to the major league level. Does not project as probably anything better than Chris Flexen, though he certainly can't be much worse than Flexen had been to start the year. He's also a righty. He's 25 years old, so doesn't seem to project as anything outstanding from a prospect perspective. So imagine that Toronto's still going to grade out pretty well. Tim, what are you looking at for bats today?
Yeah, I agree with John. I like Toronto quite a bit in terms of like a raw points stack. I just know that I'm going to have a hard time getting to a full stack of them because I really want to pay up at pitching. So like the only way that I can do that is probably getting some pieces of this Washington team, which is fine, obviously, but I just think that they're just kind of such a bad offense, but they're priced that way. So if you're going to be double paying up for pitching, Toronto and Washington make a lot of sense. I like Pittsburgh quite a bit also. I always like to stack against Patrick Corbin, regardless of salaries or ownership. I think that they're, going up against him is always a pretty strong play, and I don't think they're going to carry a lot of ownership. So I like Pittsburgh quite a bit. I like Cleveland quite a bit. They're showing up as our top optimal stack by a pretty healthy margin, 17% optimal rate at only 12% ownership. So you're also going to get leverage on the field quite a bit. So I like Cleveland quite a bit as well.
All right, you can't ever go wrong with stacking against Corbin. He tends to have bad outings at times, and again, the Pirates have been playing really well. So those offenses, Toronto, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, are going to be the popular ones today. I think maybe Boston, depending on what their lineup looks like today. We do have somebody in the YouTube chat asking about a potential Baltimore stack. Tim, I mean, Erod's going to be chalky.
Yeah, I meant to bring them up earlier. I think Erod's gonna be popular, and I think if you're making one team today, maybe that's not a great idea. But if you're making multiple teams today, I think getting to Baltimore is really a strong play. Like they're not projecting well, they're not showing up well in our stack tools at all. But I think that Erod's gonna. I mean, Erod's been great, but is he going to be this great all the time? Probably not. So I think it's a decent way to get some leverage on the field today.
All right, let's go and start breaking this down position by position. Again, if you're watching us on the YouTube feed, we'd appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up button for bringing you this early Saturday MLB content today. All right, let's go position by position. Tim, I'll stick with you and start at the catcher spot today. What are you looking at?
Yeah, so Toronto, Danny Jansen is probably your top option. I was hoping that Ruiz would be in the Nats lineup, but it looks like they're going to be going with Riley Adams, who is min price. So I think for cash games that would be interesting. It's definitely. You could also go with like Adley Rutschman if you're going to be paying up, just like I was talking about with that Baltimore stack. Big Dumper. I always like Big Dumper. He's Seattle's going to be pretty sneaky today. Nobody's going to be playing them against Gaussman. So I think he'd be like an interesting one-off. I wouldn't stack against him, but a one-off for tournaments I think is okay. And then James McCann. $2,300. He is going to carry probably some pinch hit risk, but for that price, I think he's batting 6th. I think he's a really great flyer for GPPs.
Yeah, catcher a little bit weak today, depending on what that Toronto lineup looks like. Jansen, maybe he doesn't crack that 17% ownership if he's hitting at the bottom of the lineup, and Stevenson is hitting, if he's hitting cleanup for Cincy, I think maybe that ownership will flop a little bit. You mentioned that Adams is in there for Washington. Ruiz will probably catch the second game. That's a doubleheader after yesterday's rainout.
Toronto's lineup just came out. It is Jansen in the 7 hole.
Okay, so Jansen's hitting 7th. Yeah, I imagine he'll keep as one of the most popular plays then, given that price. John, what are you looking at for catchers today? He might be muted.
Yeah, I want one of two things with catcher, either power or correlation. So I always end up with like the Kansas City catchers, either Melendez or Salvi Perez, or I just end up with my stack catcher. And I think for savings, like for cash games, I think Danny Jensen's going to be, particularly on DraftKings at 3,200. He's going to be the play there for a salary saver. Otherwise, I'm paying up for one of the Kansas City guys or going with whoever fits my stack.
All right, let's go ahead and move to first base. John, I'll give you first crack at this position. What are you looking at first today?
Yeah, I think Vladdy is the top first baseman, assuming he's in the lineup. I haven't had a chance to look
I'm pulling that up right now.
Yeah, the confirmed lineup.
Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, Chapman, Varsho, Belt, Jansen, Biggio, Kiermaier. No surprises there today.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I think Vladdy's one of the top hitters on the day. I think he's the top first baseman option. I think Matt Olson's a little bit sneaky. He's always got power, and I don't think people are going to be playing the offenses in with either the Braves or the Mets. Cody Bellinger and Joey Gallo, I think the other top first baseman options.
All right, John, Tim, what are you looking at first base today?
Yeah. I really like Connor Joe today. Like, obviously Vlad is the top option, but I think that if you can't fit him, getting to a guy like Connor Joe or Josh Naylor would be my favorite, cheaper options. And then if you really, really need the savings, getting to a guy like Spencer Torkelson would be an interesting play as well. But I think John covered it pretty well.
All right, so I'll go ahead and move this over to second. And again, as we get to the end of the show here and get through the positions, we'll take your questions. We got about 15 minutes left until lock. So if you are not a RotoGrinders premium member, you can just drop your questions in the YouTube chat. If you are a RotoGrinders premium member, we will prioritize your questions. We'll take those in the MLB Crunch Time Discord. You can get that find that at rotogrinders.com/Discord, and then get into the MLB Crunch Time chat channel there if you are a premium subscriber. All right, let's go ahead and move to second. Tim, what are you looking at second base today? Seems like we got the ownership spread out to some degree here.
Second base this year has just been so ugly. Like, I don't really have like a particular guy that like I'd say, yeah, you can one off this guy. Like, Luis Garcia at 2,600, he's got like an amazing projection in Derek Carty's bat projection system. Like, he's definitely your cash game guy, but all these other guys, like I just want to play my stacks, right? Like, I don't see there's any great source of power or, like home run upside in any of these players. So I think it's really stacks or Garcia for me in cash games.
Yeah, I mean, I think India will get some ownership given the matchup, and Cincinnati kind of went off last night. Obviously, their lineup's not out yet. That's a later start, but at 4,700, he is a bit pricey. So if you don't have the salary, I mean, 4,800 for Nico Horner, like 4,500 for Jimenez, it's just you're not getting much of a discount here either, and probably not generally the position where you're looking to use your premium salary this year. So, John, your thoughts at second?
Yeah, I think the top spend up is Nico Horner, maybe Jorge Polanco. Something with a note with the Blue Jays lineup. So Murrayfield is not in the lineup, and Kevin Biggio is in the lineup. He's only 2,100 on DraftKings. He's hitting 8th, but like I said, I think that's the top offense of the day. So getting a piece of that offense at a weak position at just 2,100, that's going to probably be my spend down salary saver at second base.
Yeah, not a bad option there. Even hitting at the bottom of the lineup against kind of an unknown pitcher, but at a position that you don't want to spend premium salary at. Certainly that's something that can give you access to some upside today. All right, John, I will stick with you. Let's go ahead and move it over to third base, where we've got a few more high upside options here.
Sure. At third base, I think the top option is Matt Chapman. He's not the most expensive, even. That is Rafi Devers or Jose Ramirez. And there are good options if you have the salary, and you might if you're spending down at pitcher at one of the pitcher spots. But I like Matt Chapman as the top third baseman from both the raw projection and for the price and for the correlation, because I like Blue Jays tonight or this morning, I guess. And then Austin Riley, I think, is probably going to see like minimal ownership. It's bad weather, but he's somebody that can break a slate by hitting 2 home runs. So that would be somebody I'm interested in at single digit ownership at 5,600 on DraftKings. All
right, Tim, your thoughts at third base today?
Yeah, I really like Jose Ramirez. He would definitely be my favorite, followed by Cabrian Hayes. I'm really high on Pittsburgh today. Candelario would be a really good salary saving option. I think I'm a little bit higher on Cleveland than Toronto. I guess if I'm not worried about salary, I think that I don't know. It's close between those two for me. I just would rather pay the extra $100 for J-Ram over Matt Chapman. I just think it's a way better play. So, but obviously if you're stacking Toronto, then yeah, obviously you want to play Matt Chapman. So I think that's where I'm at with third.
Yeah, it's kind of stinks that you can't play one of these guys at second base just because there's no options there. Obviously you got Hayes, you got Ramirez, you got Chapman are all great spend up options, but even somebody like Spencer Steer at 2,900. The problem with Spencer Steer is that, do you really want to play him as a punt at third base with all these high top end options? Like if Spencer Steer was second base eligible, he'd be the chalk kind of value over at that position. But position eligibility is a thing. Don't have a utility spot on DraftKings. Obviously, if you're playing on Fanduel, you can split them up, but these guys are on separate slates on Fanduel early slate. So it's just a kind of an interesting dynamic. Not to mention you got guys with upside like Wisdom and Devers and Austin Riley that just aren't going to have a whole lot of ownership today. So interesting place to differentiate your tournament builds today for sure. All right, let's go to shortstop. Tim, what do you like at short today?
Yeah, so, Bo Bichette, he's so expensive though. I mean, it's like so hard to fit these Toronto guys in. So I think I would prefer getting to Ahmad Rosario for a little bit cheaper, but I'm not as confident as in him as I am with J-Ram over Chapman. Like that's a tougher call. Pittsburgh, I love for 3,600. Correa for 4,600. I think he's a really, really good play also. CJ Abrams for 2,300. Like if you really, really, really need a punt in your Washington stacks, I think is a really strong play.
All right. So for what it's worth, I've been monitoring some of the lines on that Toronto game. And they do kind of seem to be shifting towards Toronto, actually even a little bit more. So for what it's worth, it seems like the sports books are even giving Toronto just a slight upgrade with flexing out and East and McGee in for the Mariners today. John, what do you got at shortstop?
So my top projected option, I think, is Bo Bichette, but it is a little bit tough to get there. I mean, I like Toronto, but he's 5,900. I think that's the most expensive of the Toronto hitters. I think for the mid-range option, yeah, I think Rodolfo Castro at 3,600 is a really strong play. He's hitting 5th for the Pirates. You've got to save money somewhere. I don't have the difference between like Bichette and Castro so much as the salary difference, 5,900 versus 3,600. And I think CJ Abrams was a great call. He's hitting ninth, but he can steal bases. He can hit home runs. He's only 2,300. So that's a really good option if you really want to save money down to 2,300 for hitting for Washington. He's hitting in the ninth spot, but that's fine. I mean, he can still steal bases if he gets on base, and he still has some power. So he's a good option as a salary saver.
All right, we'll wrap it up with the outfield. Then we'll get into your questions again. Drop those in the Discord chat or the YouTube chat. Pretty quiet so far, so I've dragged us a little bit closer to lock here with the analysis piece, but we do only have one game that locks here at 12:10, so we'll make sure we get to your questions. And let's move to the outfield. John, what are you looking at for outfielders today?
Well, but yeah, before I get to outfield, it's just a note on the slate. It might be a good slate unless you really want to play some Baltimore, Detroit guys to do the basketball trick of skipping the first game, because there's an hour difference or a 55-minute difference between the Baltimore, Detroit's first pitch and then the next game at is Pittsburgh and Washington at 1:05. So you can wait an hour if you're not playing anybody from Baltimore and Detroit and get some more lineups in. I think you're going to see less and less ownership on hitters as the day goes on because people don't like to play these lineups that haven't come out yet. Top option in the outfield, Jazz Chisholm, probably. I think the Miami lineup just came out, assuming he's in there.
He is.
He's my top option. I think he'll be highly owned. He's good cash game play. I'm not crazy about a Miami stack, but if you are playing Miami stack, I'd certainly get him in there. Ronald Acuna, I like as a guy that he's super expensive, but again, he's going to see minuscule ownership with that lineup coming in late, the bad weather. But again, he's a guy that can hit one home run, maybe two home runs, and get you some stolen bases as well. And that can break a slate open. Julio Rodriguez, and of course George Springer among the expensive options as part of that Toronto stack. If you're trying to save money, Tapia with Boston, only 2,100, and Jesus Sanchez with Miami, also only 2,100, and then Miguel Andujar hitting 6 for the Pirates. The Pirates are really cheap today, so that's a good salary saver in the outfield.
I love Chisholm today. I was disappointed that he was going to be so high owned. I thought he was going to be a little bit sneakier, but I still love him. I'm going to one-off him today, even if he is going to be chalky. I love Andrew McCutchen right around that same price point. Brian Reynolds, the same thing. If you need salary, I think Alex Call and Lane Thomas are your good Washington pivots for salary saving.
Yeah, I mean, I know Washington isn't a good team, but if you look at their lineup there, I just sorted by only Washington. You've got the top 4 are all righties. You've got Call, Candelario, Meneses, Garrett, and then you've got Lane Thomas hitting 6th. All these guys are 3,500 or less. And I mean, it's Rich Hill they're facing. Dude's 60. He throws the ball. His fastball is 85. It's not like Rich Hill's going to blow the ball by these guys. It's all going to be dependent on batted ball luck. And not that Washington is great and not that you need to go stacking them, but if you want some one-off value, if you need it to fit in your Strider lineups or your Toronto stacks or whatever, you can certainly get some value from this Washington group. All right. Let's see. Achilles has a couple of questions for us here in the Discord. A couple FanDuel cash questions. I'll throw this first one to you, John. Belt or Meneses in FanDuel cash today?
I think you got to go Brandon Belt.
All right. And then Tim, rank Buxton, McCutchen, and Springer. FanDuel cash.
I'd go Springer and then McCutchen.
Yeah, I like that today too. Springer would be my favorite. McCutchen's obviously been really good and gets to face Patrick Corbin. Nothing wrong with Buxton, but Minnesota's a team that against Keller, who's had a lot of walk issues. I like targeting Minnesota more so as a stack today as opposed to one-offs. Bill T says his hillbilly homer today is Brian Reynolds. I don't know if the hillbilly homer is a thing, if it's his thing, if it's somebody else's thing. But the hillbilly homer today is Brian Reynolds.
It sounds cool. So
it does sound cool. I didn't know, Tim, I didn't know if you were throwing out hillbilly homers or if we.
Nope, that's not what I'm into.
Well, Bill has called the hillbilly homer as Brian Reynolds today. So, all right, we'll see if Brian Reynolds can knock one out of the park. If so, then Bill has to give a home run pick on every show. Let's see. Adam says he's late to the show. Any word on the weather for the Mets and the Braves? Not yet. It's 4 hours away, so that's probably going to be one that, just like last night, we've got to keep an eye on it as it gets closer to lock time. So if you're looking for definitive news on whether or not you can play Strider, it does seem encouraging that they'll be able to get the game in, but nothing definitive yet. So let's see. DK Turney question. This is an interesting one from K-Town's finest. John, any interest in playing Belt over Vladdy in your Toronto stacks today?
Yeah, I think it depends kind of what you're doing with pitching and with the other hitters outside of your stack, but that's a big price difference. So I like Belt at only 2,300. I think that's a really good salary saver, and that might get you the spend ups at both pitching spots. So that's very much in play.
If you are into the BVP angle, Kurt says that McCutchen has 5 career homers against Corbin. He's probably not the only one with 5 career homers against Corbin, but at least he has had some success in the past against him. We got a Pirates fan in the chat also asking thoughts on Bay, who is hitting 8th for the Pirates today. He is a bit expensive at 3,800, and he's left-handed, so lefty is probably going to be one of the lowest owned Pirates today. Don't absolutely hate it as part of his stack, but otherwise feels like probably the guy that most people will leave out of their Pittsburgh stacks today. All right, I don't see any other questions in the Discord. Quick reminder, again, if you're playing on Fanduel, our sponsor site, they have split up the early slates. We've got just 5 games tonight. We'll be back with another show for the night games this evening. But for the early slates here, Fanduel with a 4-game slate that starts now, but then another 6-game slate that's later, which includes 2 games that the DraftKings slate does not. And you will see, even if I just select all the games, if I sort by projected fantasy points, look at this. The top 11 hitters in projected fantasy points are all from that game in Mexico City with San Francisco and San Diego. That's even with Musgrove, who's not a gas can pitching for the Padres. I mean, the total is 15.5, and the Padres are projected for 9 runs. Like I've never seen a total like this in a major league game. So if you're playing on FanDuel, that second early slate, just let other people make the mistakes. Make sure you're using guys from that game. Don't use the pitchers from that game. And then, obviously you've got kind of a similar pitching pool. That slate does also add the Philly-Houston game, which is Christian Javier against Zach Wheeler. So a couple of viable pitching options as well in that game if you end up having to pivot off of Strider because of the weather as we get closer to that lock. So that's the thoughts on kind of that later FanDuel slate. It is kind of disappointing that we don't have the the Mexico City game with that huge total on something of a main slate. That would be pretty cool, but especially with the Coors game tonight, it would have been really interesting to see how all of a sudden nobody's playing Coors because everyone's playing the 15-run total. But we are at the lock here. Jamino says that total is 15. That's about like a Texans team total for football. Boy, the poor Texans. All right. Tim, anything else from you before we call it a morning?
No, good to have a show with you guys, and good luck, everybody.
All right, John, you got anything else?
No, it's we got almost all the lineups in. I didn't think we'd come close, but really just missing the Braves and Mets, Cubs, Oakland, and Cleveland. So yeah, make sure you're monitoring that as the day goes on and swapping your lineups appropriately.
All right. Yeah. And keep an eye on the weather too. If you are in that Strider game in New York, make sure that's good. Kevin Roth will keep us posted with updates. We'll be back tonight before the night slate with another show for you. 5 games this evening, including Kershaw pitching against my Cardinals tonight. Yet another chance for me to end the night disappointed. But we will bring that up later. Thanks to Tim. Thanks to John for joining me. Thanks to Rob for producing behind the scenes for us. Hope you all brought your coffee this morning and are ready for a long Saturday of baseball. I am Justin, and we'll be back with you later on this afternoon for the main slate. So we'll see you then, everybody. Take care.